Good morning. Thank you, Professor Iain, for having us today. So we are preparing a project for the Environmental International Day to be issued by the Earth Project. And we are preparing a series of interview. And today we have the honor to have your interview. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep, so I'm Iain Stewart. I'm a professor of geoscience communication at the University of Plymouth in the UK, but I'm also got a research chair in sustainability at the Royal Scientific Society in Jordan. And my main interest is in science society engagement, how we communicate to multiple publics. It could be communities, it could be the general public, it could be politicians and decision makers about science and scientific issues. And that covers a wide range of areas from disaster risk, geoenergy, but I've done a lot of work on climate change. I've done some work, I've made 2 television programs with BBC Science, documentaries on climate change and related issues. And I've just finished as communications lead and evidence group chair for the Scottish Climate Assembly, which was an initiative that the Scottish government to bring together 100 ordinary people from across Scotland, and over the course of 6 weekends to get them to get their views on what the solutions are, what should be done about climate change. And that's a report that goes to the Scottish, has gone to the Scottish government and has to be reported back to. So I'm really interested in this notion of engaging people in these issues, these complicated issues.
Thank you. That's a really amazing background. So, Professor, could you please give a little brief about what is geoscience communication?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm the only person in the world with that job. So I wouldn't think of, for me, the way that I would define it is how we communicate the importance of the planet to people, to ordinary people. It's about how the planet works and its history, but it's also what it means for us. And that could be a whole set of different issues. It's issues around, like I mentioned, climate change, but biodiversity loss, natural resource depletion, water security, environmental pollution, energy transition. All of these things are complicated science that relate to an understanding of the planet, but most people are not really familiar with that. So it's finding ways to connect to people around these issues. And I tend to use popular media, television. That's my background, but it could be anything. It could be writing about it. It could be poetry. It could be music, dance, whatever.
You have been working on documentaries with BBC for 15 years to tackle controversial problems like climate change. Why climate change is still a controversial problem?
It's controversial because it's complicated, and it's complicated not just for the technical reasons. In fact, the science, the basic science of climate change is something that was sorted out 150 years ago. It's kind of basic level physics. So, and it really only becomes a big problem probably around about 1980, when it switches from being a science issue, particularly in the USA, to being a political, economic issue. And that then brings it into wider society and the way that people priorities are around, say, jobs and livelihoods and tax and how they see international control versus everything else. So a lot of the times where you hear people arguing against climate change, they're arguing about it not from a scientific perspective, but they're arguing from an economic, their mindset, their cultural mindset about low tax, minimum international interference in markets, these kind of issues, which then makes them interpret the science in a particular way. But I have to say the other thing is it's really complicated, and a lot of normal people are suddenly expected to start understanding this strange science world that they've not really encountered very much. And I'm not sure some scientists have done brilliant jobs on communicating it, but I don't think scientists really up until recently thought it was their job to do this. And so I think we've not really been as good in science about carrying it forward. And I think what's happening increasingly is it's non-science groups, activist groups, environmental groups, faith groups, business leaders, celebrities that are carrying it forward into society. But they're carrying the science. If you think of Greta Thunberg, she said her main thing is don't listen to me, I'm a 17-year-old schoolgirl, listen to the scientists. And that's how she's kind of echoing and amplifying the scientists. So overall, it's a really messy, complicated issue that fundamentally requires us to change the way we live our lives. And that's always going to be hard.
So the most difficult problem to tackle climate change, you would say, is the non-technical informations that are distributed.
Yeah, I think that I give lots of, I used to give a lot more. I give lots of talks on climate change, and I talked about the climate science, and very quickly I realized that people went, okay, that's fine, but we don't want to know about the science. We want to know about the solutions. We get the science enough to know we need to do something about it. Now, what should we do about it? And it was at that point that I realized that as a scientist, I didn't have those answers, because that's an issue for society to look at the various options ahead and make these decisions. And so our job as science communicators is to open up those options for society to get them being discussed. And I think a lot of scientists and science communicators even kind of feel it's the other way around, that their job as scientists is to narrow the policy options by explaining the science so well that it's very clear there's only one operation, one way, one solution. And of course, lots and lots of scientists are offering up different single solutions, and it's just a mess. So I think that really scientists need to be very careful about what they do. They need to lay out what their understanding of the basic processes and the projections are. And then they need to provide the information that allows other people to assess those against all sorts of other aspects, social and economic and cultural aspects. And ultimately, it's society and it's the public and the politicians that will decide what we do about climate change. But we definitely have a role. But I think in many respects, we've done the complicated bit for us, which was identifying the problem. And now we need to help people with the even more complicated bit of the solution.
So how will be the role of popular media in enhancing the public awareness with actual technical information?
Yeah, popular media is really important because it's popular, it's got wide reach. And I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing climate change getting discussed very openly, conversations in bars and cafes around the world. It's on the news in ways that are surprising. It's not seen as the sciencey thing stuck in the corner. It's very much part of the everyday conversation, and popular media will reflect that. I think that but popular media also, it's hard to know whether popular media leads or follows. Should we be persuading people to change, or should we be reflecting the challenges of that change? And I think in a way it does both, and therefore it's quite complicated to use it. So I think that what I would say is I think scientists should understand the media landscape, the media world. They should understand how to use popular media, and increasingly that's social media. But I don't think the answers are going to be there. The answers are still going to be in engaging people face-to-face, one-to-one, in various different fora about the importance to change the way they live. I don't think people are going to just be persuaded by the odd tweet or blog post or documentary. Although in saying that, having said that last one, the work that David Attenborough's done over the last 5 years has been extraordinary. And so certain individuals that are completely trusted in that media world can have a big difference. But by and large, I think popular media has got a role, but it's not going to provide the only answer.
Okay, thank you. And as the last question for you would be, what do you think is an action someone can take today after they watch this interview to help the environment?
Well, if you look at the science, it's pretty clear. Don't have a kid, don't have children, don't eat meat, don't fly, which all sounds very negative in kind of the world. And those issues will have to be taken seriously. But I wouldn't, in terms of the everyday, I think it goes back to the point I made earlier, which is talk about it. This is part of the changing world that we're in. It's not for some people, there may be other parts, the social changes that are starting to happen and economic challenges. So it's part of the tapestry of issues that we deal with. And so I think it's a case of just making sure that people talk about the environment and climate alongside the other things that they care deeply about, and not to see it tucked away as a science issue that only academic-minded people can look at. But eventually, we will individually and collectively have to come to issues around how we travel and our diet and our whole lifestyle consumption and things like that. But I think we'll get to that by raising the bar on the conversation so that it's perfectly okay to be discussing these things quite openly.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. It was a very exciting interview, and see you later.
Thanks, Felipe. Thank you very much for asking me.
Thank you.